All right. So, hey, just want to welcome everyone today, and we've got a really special guest with us, which is Krystle Steinhoff. And Krystle, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Martin. I'm great. How are you?
Oh, that's great. I mean, Krystle, I sort of met Krystle and her lovely husband Rob only a few months ago, and we had a lovely dinner together. But one of the things that she shared with me over dinner was her journey into early education, and I thought there was some really maybe perhaps you could just share a snippet of how did you get into early education? Because understand you're a lawyer by trade, aren't you?
Yes, I'm a lawyer by trade. But as many people know, once you have children, everything changes. So when
Mm,
we had our first son, Patrick, I had to find childcare for him immediately. Well, once he was 12 weeks old. And we lived in
mm,
Denver at the time, and we found a wonderful spot. Um, and that was great until it wasn't, things change. And then we ended up moving back home to Georgia, where we met in 1999. And the childcare situation here was very, very bad. Um,
mm,
I was that mom who read all the books and I knew what colors were good for infants. And, brain growth from 0 to 5 is just huge. And so it
mm,
was important to me that my boys were being engaged with and learning and not just being babysat. So when we moved to Georgia, the final straw for me was when I went to go pick up my 14-month-old, and he was strapped into a bye-bye buggy, and he was facing a television with nothing to
oh,
do, just like dazing off like a zombie
mm,
or, just dazing off. And when I asked the director, why is my 14-month-old watching television? Because we don't do that. The director said,
mm,
oh, it was just for a minute or two while we transitioned in the buggy so they wouldn't cry. And I said, okay. But the next day, the teacher was honest and said, no, I do that twice a day for 30 minutes so I can clean the room. And I thought,
mm.
oh my gosh,
Oh
that's five
no.
hours of television per week for my 14-month-old. And he deserves better. And every day when I dropped off, the teachers just looked miserable. And I thought they deserve better too. And so that
Mm.
kind of kicked into gear um, the rest. So I was
So
practicing.
basically, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you saw the problem and you tried to solve it, right? And then you started your own
Yeah, we couldn't find
center.
good childcare, so we brought it. And I was watching news one day, it was February 2020, and I saw a story of a daycare that was shut down nearby. And I texted
Wow.
Rob right away and I said, Rob, find out who owns this building. Let's see what we can do. And so he sent a letter via snail mail, and 3 days later, he got a phone call. And 9 months after that, after lots of number crunching and praying and,
Yeah.
doing presentations to our family to see if they would invest, which they all said, no, you've both lost your minds. We're not getting you a penny. 9 months after that phone call, we closed on our building, which is a 20,000 square foot building in Richmond Hill, Georgia. We're
Yeah.
licensed for 290 kids,
Wow.
and it's been amazing. It was the biggest risk we could have taken, and I have no regrets.
And especially around COVID, right? I mean, that's kind
Smack
of
in the
crazy.
beginning
Yeah.
of COVID. That's why our families thought we had literally lost our minds. But
But good
it
on
all
you. I
worked out.
mean, being a fellow entrepreneur, it's about risk and reward, isn't it? And
Yes.
so you made success of that from now, and good on you, for taking that risk. And also, for the help of, because you're helping not only your child, but you're helping all these other children get better education, like you said, at the early years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And now my kids don't even go to Thrive. They're in big boy school. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
which was sad, but we still are making a big difference. So I love it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So the topic today we're talking about is trademarking your childcare business, and um, so this is one of the things that and I'll probably sort of make some comments later on, but we recently been on a bit of a journey on registering one place childcare in the US. So I know
Hmm.
a bit about this, probably more than I ever want to know, to be honest, Krystle. But
Yeah.
but you being sort of the expert, I just wanted to sort of ask you, the first question is, well, if you want to trademark your childcare business, whereabouts do you start? What's your starting point?
I would say the first starting point would be to choose a name, and that's very important that you choose wisely.
Mm,
As entrepreneurs, we put a lot of time and money into coming up with a name, and then you've got to do the branding and the marketing, and
mm,
there's nothing worse than spending all of that time and money on those things only to get a cease and desist letter from somebody who has a name that's similar. It's
yeah,
happened many
yeah.
times. So
And
choosing
so
the name is very important.
how do you, I mean, it's interesting you say that because, again, I remember when we first started, you choose a name and you kind of do a Google search on it. But what would you suggest? You choose the name, you've got your great name, and what would you suggest? How do you do the search? How do you check that there isn't anybody else around
You could
trademark?
always start with Google, and if you find something, move on. Go on to the next. Well,
Right,
once you do the initial Google search, see if that trademark or name has been trademarked, and if it hasn't, proceed with a comprehensive search, which I typically would use a third party for.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say that, and when we talk about names, and no doubt you'll talk about this a bit later on, but the trademarks have different categories that you can trademark your
Mm-hmm.
trademark in. So having the name like McDonald's Childcare may be okay, even though there's McDonald's fast food. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong?
You're almost correct. So
Okay.
McDonald's childcare would be very descriptive and
Yeah.
generic because you are
Right.
describing what you're doing, and that would not be trademarkable. They
Right.
they
Right.
want something that is different. They want it to be inherently distinctive. So I did a quick search of, daycare names, and a few that popped up that would be great, and I don't know if they exist or not, would be like Apple Blossom or Boogie Woogie, Busy
Yeah.
Beavers. It doesn't describe what the service is.
Okay.
So, like, we've got Delta for airlines and Delta for faucets. Those were both
Yes.
fine to trademark because they're in completely different services or of goods or services.
And I suppose it's quite interesting, like, we have a lot of customers in New Zealand, Australia, and the US, and some of them have the same name,
Mm-hmm.
because and I think what you're saying is, before you get too invested in a name, I think what you're saying is that you got to check this out because what's the point of doing all this work and then you find out you can't use it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people are becoming more litigious year after
Yeah.
year. And when
Yeah.
you do put that amount of money and time into your brand, you don't want it to be, um, watered down by other people using a similar name or
So
diluted.
for your name Thrive, was that your first choice or was your second or third choice or what?
It was our first choice.
Oh, good. Well done. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I did do a search. There was nothing in the US close to it that had a trademark. So
Yeah.
that was one of the first things I did was
Right.
register for my trademark. And I think it took about a year and a half between filing the application and getting it.
Yeah. So, how you mentioned that you can engage someone to check out your names. Is that a lawyer or is that a trademark lawyer or is that some other third party?
You can absolutely use a trademark lawyer. You don't have to though, especially if you're domiciled in the US, which means you've got a home address in the US. The only
Right.
time that the USPTO requires that you have a US licensed attorney is if you are not domiciled in the US. So if you lived in New Zealand and you wanted to file a trademark with the USPTO, you would have to hire an attorney to do that.
Yeah. No, I suppose probably make my question a bit clearer in the sense of actually, just figuring out if your name is okay. Is that
hmm
what lawyers do, or is there some third party?
It's a third
Um,
party typically, just
right.
because there is so much to search and it's
Right.
worth paying a third party, a flat fee to do that and then having the attorney review the results as
Right.
opposed
Okay.
to having the attorney spend hours searching. That wouldn't be worth it.
Yes.
hmm
Right. right. And I suppose if some of the listeners are interested in trying to find out who that is, they could contact us and we can put them on to you, and you could perhaps um, communicate directly with those people to who you might recommend or something like
Oh, I'd be happy to.
that. Okay, that'd be great. So let's get into the nuts and bolts now. Is well, how do you actually file a trademark, and who do you file? When you talked about PTO, explain what it actually is.
Yes, so the USPTO is the US Patent and Trademark Office.
Okay,
And so a trademark is something that protects brands, names, slogans, logos, and other source identifiers.
right,
A patent protects new inventions, processes, and machines. That's a
right.
completely different
Yeah,
monster than trademarks. Patent law
yeah,
requires its own bar. So trademarks is what I'm talking about. And you file those through the USPTO.
yeah.
And you would go to uspto.gov
Okay,
to start the process.
uspto.gov. Yep,
hmm Once you have decided on a name and you've done your search to make sure there's no other um, confusingly similar trademarks, then you will go to the application. Again, it's something you can do on your own if you
okay,
live in the US. And it's very simple, honestly, but it's easy to make mistakes. So
right.
there are only 6 things that you need to do to file a trademark. The first, you have to have your name and address as the owner of the trademark.
Yep, yep,
And then you've got to state the entity type. Will it be owned by an individual or will
yep,
it be owned by a corporation? And then you've got to demonstrate that you're actually using the trademark or you intend to use it.
right, right.
hmm Then the toughest part of the application is the description. You
Mm,
don't want to be too vague or too narrow
mm,
because you've got to prove with the final step of providing a specimen that you're actually doing everything that you're saying you're doing. So um,
right,
with Thrive, I put childcare
right,
services because it embodies everything that I felt I needed at the time. But if I
right.
wanted to sell merchandise or have a coffee shop, it would be more involved.
Yeah, and I know that putting that description, because that determines, isn't it, what category the trademark goes in, doesn't it?
Yeah, so there's
And
45 classes, international classes with the USPTO.
right,
And every class that you have is an additional fee for the application. Now,
right.
many classes have subs that go with the actual class, so you don't have to have a lot of classes, but it depends.
So did you file your trademark in one class or multiple classes?
I just did one class.
And is that the norm? Is that what most people would do if you're in a childcare business?
Well, I searched for different names of childcare businesses that I thought might have trademarks while I was prepping for this podcast, and I found very few. And the ones that I did
Mm.
find, there weren't many classes. It was mostly just one.
So you obviously filed it because your background as a lawyer and you're a
hmm
trademark lawyer. But
hmm
would you recommend, you know, would you actually recommend doing it yourself, or would you recommend, look, just pay a lawyer to do it properly? What would your suggestion be?
As any good lawyer would say, it depends.
Right.
It depends on how confident you are in following the instructions and doing a thorough enough job. You can pay for an attorney and have the peace of mind that they're going to do a great job. But some people can't afford attorneys. And in
Yep.
that case, I would suggest going through, a subscription like LegalZoom. They have an attorney service and they
Okay.
help with trademarks. It's much more affordable. I used to do some work with them. They're not paying me to say that, but that was really fun to do. Lots
Okay.
of. hmm
Well, that's a great suggestion. Um, is there anything you need to consider if you've got multiple locations, or it doesn't really make a difference?
With multiple locations, the only thing that would make a difference is if they all had different names. It could get
Right.
pricey because each location with each different name would need a different trademark. But if you've got multiple locations, with the same name, that one trademark covers them all. So we want to grow, and no matter how many locations we have within the US anyway, our trademark would cover all of them.
Because as I understand, if say you had multiple locations and it was Thrive Dallas or Thrive Los Angeles, it's really the Thrive name that you're protecting, isn't it? It doesn't really matter about the descriptor where it is, sort of thing, does it?
Right. Yeah, correct. Unless you trademarked Thrive Los Angeles or Thrive New York,
Exactly.
then it
Right.
wouldn't matter.
Right. And yeah, you probably wouldn't bother doing that, unless you were
Mm-mm.
kind of potentially, yeah, you wouldn't bother doing that. Um, here's a good question, and I think I know the answer to this is you mentioned that you need to put down who owns the trademark, right? So who would you say from a legal entity perspective, I'm assuming that you would want the company which owns the assets of the childcare business to own the trademark, to own the IP and must be that. Would you agree with that?
It makes it easier if down the road you want to sell. So a lot of
Exactly. Yeah.
entrepreneurs go into business with the expectation that they'll build it up and sell it. If
Yeah.
you put the trademark in the name of the business or the entity, it's one less step you have to do down the road. It's much easier to transfer it.
Right. And the reality also is that, anyone buying your business, they're buying your name, aren't they? Buying your reputation. So that would be a prerequisite for them buying your center, unless
Right.
they're completely rebranding it, sort of thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay. So once you file the trademark, how much does it cost to file the trademark if you're doing it yourself? Approximately.
So if you do it yourself, the initial fee is $250, and that's for what's called a T's Plus
Okay.
application. And then
Yep.
every class that you add, every class of good or services is an extra 250, I
Yep.
believe. So if you add two
Okay.
classes, it's 500. If you add just one, it's 250.
Okay.
If you
And is
have
that
10
that's a
classes,
one-off
it's
fee?
more.
That's non
Hmm?
that's a one-off fee, and that's not an annual fee?
No, there's no annual fee. It's a one-off fee.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then
Yep.
at year 5, between year 5 and 6, there is just one thing you need to do to make sure that you're still in business, because they don't want you to get a trademark and then not do anything with it because somebody else might want it. So you've got to
Right.
kind of pop up a few years later to make sure you're still doing what you said you were doing.
Okay. And okay. And how long does it take then? Okay, so you submitted the trademark online. How long does it take then to get it approved?
So for me, it took about 18 months. Right
Yep.
now, the USPTO is reviewing trademark applications that were submitted in February of 2023. So once they review it, then they'll either approve it or they'll issue an office action. An office action is something that, they found something wrong with it. It's seemingly similar, or the description doesn't sound right, or the specimen isn't good enough, and you have a certain time period to respond to that. But if everything's,
So they'll come back to,
mm-hmm.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
um, they'll come back to you if they find that there is something similar, isn't it? And then you've got to basically either say, well, no, it's not. That's fine. It should be okay. Or you have to start again, don't you? But that's
Mm-hmm.
not what you really want to get to, obviously.
You don't want to get there. You want to avoid an office action. When you do get an office action, if it's one that says it's confusingly similar, that's when you either say, okay, moving on to the drawing board, or you hire an attorney to.
At that stage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So um, and as once you actually file, even though it has been approved, does that count? Say if there was another competitor, someone comes in and tries to file the same name after you, the fact that you filed earlier, that's to your advantage, one would assume, right?
It is. Yes.
So therefore, it's obviously better that if you've got this idea, if you haven't basically you started your business and you haven't trademarked your business, you should get onto it as soon as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because the last thing you want um, is that someone opens up, trademarks the name of your current business, right? Your current center,
Correct.
right?
But even if somebody were to do that, you could claim that you had a common law trademark. A common law trademark
Yes.
is the type of trademark that, you don't have to apply for it. It's not federally recognized. It's just recognized in your geographic location.
So if, say, hypothetically that did happen, that someone, you've been, say, in your business for like 2 or 3 years, you never trademarked it, and someone comes along and you finds out that they trademark it, you can object to that trademark, can't you? Because you've actually been in business and operating that name for quite a while. Is that correct?
Correct. And actually, the USPTO agent will most likely refuse the application because of the similarity.
Yep, 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 yep. Okay. Um, so once it's 18 months, do you just get an email or do you get a certificate, or what happens when you get the trademark?
You get an email.
Certificate?
You get
Yep.
an email from the USPTO, and then you eventually, after lots of patience, get your certificate in the mail.
Oh, lovely. And once you do that, all of us have seen the TM mark and the R mark.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain the difference between them and when you can use those on your,
Yeah.
listing? Yep.
So the TM next to names is for when you've filed your trademark application, and that puts the
Right,
public on notice that you filed it. You only use
right.
the R when you are a registered trademark, hence the R.
Um, I'm just curious, do many people actually use the R? Do they actually use it in their collateral and stuff like that? Is
I
that common?
personally don't. I just haven't had time, I guess, to put it on anything. And I think it's a good idea too, though. I think I probably will after refreshing to prepare for this. But if you
Well,
don't use it, it's not like you won't have a standing, against somebody
yeah,
trying to impinge on your trademark.
yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like all the same, and in some ways, you don't really see it that often, but it does. But at the same time, I think having that on your name gives you a sense of, I want to say authorities might not be the right word, but credibility. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying. So, but it is interesting though that I think one of the things, surmising what you just said, is that, you know, having your ducks in a row in the sense of getting your business trademarked is basically an essential part of your business, especially if the brand is really important, right? That's
It
what people
is.
know you about,
It's so
right?
important. You don't want to dilute it. You want it to be strong. Again, especially if you plan on exiting one day.
And also, we talked about this common trademark, but you don't really want to rely on that idea. Ideally, you really want to file your trademark as soon as you can, right? To protect yourselves from the hassle. And we've had to do this for the hassle of basically someone else claiming your trademark.
Mm-hmm.
Because that sometimes happens as well, doesn't it? That they make a mistake and then you've got to basically use lawyers to sort that out. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that.
No one wants to do that.
Mm-mm.
So, I mean, yeah, these are really great points. And I think it's just one of the things it says is it's all part of your marketing and part of your brand presence and some of the fundamental things you should do when you're starting your childcare organization. Okay, that's great. Do you have any other sort of points about trademarks before we wrap it up here?
Let me see. Points about trademarks. Once you do have your trademark registration and you've got your certificate and you're the proud owner, that's not the end of it. Your job's not over. You still need to keep an eye on people who might be infringing upon your trademark. Because the issue
Right,
is if they are and you let it go on long enough, let's say
right,
5 years, that could be an issue. So what's happened to me before is people will tag Thrive, let's say on Facebook, but they tag the wrong Thrive. And
right,
so
right,
when that happens to you and you've got a trademark, you've got to, send a letter, and it's not very great for the recipient, but you've got to let them know, hey, people are mistaking you for us and we've got a trademark, so please cease using the name.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Because the risk is, like you said, if you don't do that and they continue using the name, potentially they could say, well, we've been using it, longer than you or something like that, and they could actually challenge you. Um, Again, it's affecting your intellectual property,
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, and no one likes receiving these letters, but
No, I
I'm
know.
sure that
I personally don't like sending them. I know how tough it can be to think of a name and work on your brand. And I really am a nice person, but I've got to protect the business too.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Anything else? I've got some final questions. I just want to talk to you non-trademarky.
Sure.
Um, So my final question is really that's what we asked. We've got a couple of questions. Is that we ask all we ask our guests is, what do you think the biggest challenges to your industry in the next few years? What are the biggest challenges for you and your industry?
Um, I'm usually a very optimistic and positive person, so it can be tough for me to think of challenges. But I would say one of them would be the lack of an educated and motivated workforce.
Yeah.
Early childhood educators aren't given nearly enough credit for all of the work they do. And I personally think it's the most important job in the world. They are creating the doctors and the lawyers, and those first
Yes.
5 years of life are crucial for brain growth and development. And if we
Yes.
can't have amazing people in the classrooms because we can't pay them enough and nobody's getting the degrees that they need, I see that as the
Yes.
biggest challenge in the next few years.
Right.
And I think it
And,
needs to
and
be taken
also
seriously.
and also we need, I think what the pandemic sort of highlighted, isn't it, that we need good quality childcare for people to go to work as well.
Absolutely. I think that it revolves around childcare. If you don't have childcare, you can't go to work. And then to be a parent who is forced to drop their child off at a mediocre daycare, it's
Mm,
it's it's not worth dropping them off if you can't focus while you're at work. And that was my
exactly.
problem before all of this happened. COVID shut everything down. I was home, this happened, and I was able to
Yeah.
do this. But I was this close to just quitting practicing law to stay home with my baby after that moment in the stroller.
Wow. Wow. And finally, do you like have a personal motto or some motivational quote that you like to share with our listeners?
I have two that I swear by.
Okay.
I couldn't pick just one. And
Okay.
so the first it's an oldie but a goodie. It's the golden rule. Treating others the
Right.
way that you want to be treated. I I love that. I was raised on that by both of my parents, and I think it's so important to be empathetic to what people are going
Yep.
through. Never assume anything. So I live
Yep.
by the golden rule. And then the second one is what I call the humble, hopeful vision. So when you feel like you are on top of the world and you're winning at everything and nothing's going wrong, you have to stay humble.
Mm,
And on the other hand, when you feel like the world's against you and nothing's going right and you just can't win, you have to stay hopeful. And
mm,
every time I think that or say that, I get goosebumps because it's so true. And
mm.
I just love that.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I really like just what you said because I think as being entrepreneurs, you have your highs and you have your lows, and
Daily.
it's daily, right? You sort of think, oh gosh, what sort of day is this going to be like?
Yeah.
But you got to keep plowing on, and I think, um, yeah, I really like what you said. That's awesome. Yeah.
Thanks, Martin.
Hey, well, thanks so much for your time, Krystle, and this has been really good. And if you got any sort of questions about trademarks, then um, probably don't come and talk to me. But there's lots of resources out there. But more than happy to connect you with Krystle if you got any further questions. So email us at hello@oneplaceonline.com. Anyway, so thanks again, Krystle, for your time and lovely talk.
Thank you, Martin, as always. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.